in your minds, what is the greatest event to happen in reference to Christianity that if it did not happen, it changes everything? My name is Calvin Barrett. I'm a second-year student at the Memphis School of Preaching. And on Outward, we will be discussing the greatest event to ever happen in history. Now, that may sound kind of extreme, but I hope you understand why I said that as we go throughout this sermon. This event is the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, you may wonder why I didn't say his birth, his life, or his death. And those are very important things that should not be overlooked. But looking throughout history, we can see people that believed that Jesus was born and that he lived and that he died. But the thing that they have trouble believing is that he raised from the dead. Now, if this did not happen, then the Bible is wrong. Looking through the Old and New Testament, we see that the resurrection is prophesied and that is told about. We have accounts of it in the Bible. So if it did not happen, if it is not an actual event, a historical event, then we should not be reading our Bibles. See from 1 Corinthians 15 that our faith is in vain, that preaching is in vain. And Paul says he and others that had seen the risen Jesus or had made that claim are then false witnesses. With the overall theme of drawing closer to God, what better way to do that than to look and have an open and honest discussion about the very center, the linchpin of Christianity, the resurrection of Jesus, and see if it really did happen. We have three main points. We'll look at the biblical accounts surrounding this event. We'll look at some objections throughout history, and then we'll look at some evidences to support it. First of all, the biblical account. Before the crucifixion, Jesus was very clear about what was going to happen. If you would, turn in your Bibles with me to John 10. John chapter 10. We'll be using our Bibles a lot in this point to lay the foundation for the rest of the sermon. In John 10, we'll begin in verse 17. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father. This is Jesus speaking here, and he tells his followers that he is going to lay down his life, and he is going to take it again. This was not just a backup plan. This is not just something that he thought of in the moment. No, this was something that was planned. We also see that in Matthew 16. Matthew 16, 21. From that time forth began Jesus to show unto his disciples how that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised again the third day. Again, this is something that Jesus is very clear about. He does not hide that from his followers. Now, during the crucifixion, Jesus died. Again, the Bible is very clear about this. It is not try to hide it. There's no getting around that. Matthew 27. Matthew 27, there's a lot that we could read here. I will go ahead and go into verse 50. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. Notice that phrasing there. As Jesus said in John 10, he would give his life up. Jesus gives his life up here. And we see many things happen here, but we'll drop down to verse 54. And when the centurion and they that were with him, watching Jesus, saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, truly this was the Son of God. And notice this, and many women were there, beholding afar off, which followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering unto him, among which was Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. So we see that the women that were following Jesus throughout his ministry were there when he died. Now, not only do the writers say that he died, the Romans made sure that he died. If you keep your finger there in Matthew 27, we'll come back to that and turn to John 19. John 19, we'll begin in verse 32. Then the soldiers came and brake the legs of the first and of the other, which was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already, they brake not his legs. But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. So again, as I said, the Romans made sure that Jesus was dead. That is what they did with those that were crucified. As we saw, they broke the legs of the other two that were crucified with him, but they pierced his side. Now, after the crucifixion and after he was shown to be dead, he was buried. We also see that he was raised. Going back to Matthew 27, beginning in verse 59. And when Joseph, we see from verse 57, this is Joseph of Arimathea. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. And notice who was there when this happened. And there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. Now the next day that followed, the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again. So this was something, as stated, was common. Jesus didn't hide this. Even the ones that wanted him crucified knew this. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say to the people, He is risen from the dead. So the last error shall be worse than the first. Pilate said unto them, Ye have a watch. Go your way, and make it as sure as you can. So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch. So we see there that they set guards around that specific tomb. Then going into chapter 28 of Matthew. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake. So the guards that were there did shake and became as dead men. And the angel answered and said unto the women, Fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. As he said, Come, see the place where the Lord lay, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him, and lo, I have told you. And they departed quickly from the sepulchre with fear and great joy, and did run to bring his disciples word. So we notice that those women that were there noticed that the body wasn't there. They were told what happened. Jesus rose from the dead. Jesus was resurrected. Now, there are many other passages we can discuss. We can discuss what happened after these events. But now I want to move to our next point, objections throughout history. Now, I'm going to bring up a few different religions. And when I use those names, I'm using them in the broad sense because I know that some that claim to be a part of that religion do not believe everything that the religion believes. The first one is Islam. Now, Muslims will claim that they believe that Jesus was a great man. They believe that he should be regarded as a prophet. And they also believe that he ascended into heaven. What they do not believe is that he was crucified, and so they do not believe that he was resurrected. But quoting from the Quran, Surah 4, 157 to 158, and for boasting, this is a Jew speaking here, we killed the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, messenger of Allah. But they neither killed him nor crucified him. It was only made to appear so. Rather, Allah raised him up to himself, and Allah is almighty, all-wise. Now, from what I found in my research, they actually believe that Jesus switched places with someone before he was crucified, and Allah took him into heaven at that point. Now, this, along with several other parts of this, does not match up with what the Bible says and what is recorded. How would the Jews not recognize that this was a different man that was being crucified? How would the women that were following him throughout his ministry, that were standing there at the foot of the cross, not realize that that was not their Messiah? How would his own mother, as recorded in John 19:6, not realize that that was not her son speaking to her from the cross? It does not add up. Also, if Jesus did not rise from the dead, then he is a liar, and he should not be regarded as a prophet. Judging from common sense and also Deuteronomy 18:22, if a prophet prophesies something and it does not come to pass, then, as I said, he is a liar. He should not be listened to in anything else that he says. We know that that is not the case for Jesus. We know that what he said did come to pass. And another group that rejects this happening is the Jews, Judaism. And they also believe that Jesus was a great man, and they do believe that he was crucified. What they do not believe was that he was resurrected. To explain the missing body, there are several objections to this, several different theories of the missing body. One of those being the earliest. We find that in Matthew 28. Matthew 28, verse 11. Now when they were going, behold, some of the watch, so some of those guards that were guarding the tomb, came into the city and showed unto the chief priests all the things that were done. And when they were assembled with the elders and had taken counsel, they gave large money unto the soldiers, saying, Say ye, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. And if this come to the governor's ears, we will persuade him and secure you. So they took the money and did as they were taught. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. This is actually a common theory that is still going around, that the disciples stole the body. That must have been what happened. Now, the first issue with this is that these were some of the best guards in history. If these guards, which were likely Roman, judging from that word watch, would have failed at their job, then they would have faced punishment. The Jewish leaders knew this. That's why they said if it got to the governor that they would cover for them. Another issue with it is that his followers fled when he was arrested, as recorded in Mark 14:50. And just before that, Peter was trying to use physical violence to escape the situation. They would have had to have had a complete change of mind to want to rally up and go and steal the body of Jesus. But also, how would they have snuck to the tomb, rolled away that great stone, went into the tomb and taken out the body of Jesus, unwrapped the garment and folded it and placed it there and taken the body out, all while the guards slept? It does not add up. Another issue with this is that if they did steal the body, and this is something that we'll get to a little bit later, is that it does not make logical sense for even one of the disciples to do this, to steal the body, and then to die for that known lie. There are a few other objections that I would like to touch on here. One is that he did not really die. He was just unconscious because of the pain that he was facing, or several other reasons. This is called the swooning theory. First of all, looking back at the accounts that we discussed at the beginning, the Romans made sure that he was dead. The Romans were historically vicious when it came to the crucifixion. They had perfected it. Now, they would have made sure that he was dead, or as stated, they would have failed. And if they would have failed, they would have been punished. No, they made sure he was dead. Second, again, looking back to those accounts, they cut his side open with a spear. Blood and water flowed out of his side. Especially in those days, without the medical advances that we have today, one could not survive going through all of this pain and all this torture to the body. Jesus did die. Another objection is that they forgot where the tomb was. They simply misplaced where it was. Now, first of all, this was a specific tomb. As stated in Matthew's account, this was the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. It was a rich man's tomb. No one had ever been in that tomb before. We see that he took care of that body. Second, the women that were there, the first ones to see the empty tomb, were also there when the body was placed into the tomb. Now, if you have ever buried a loved one and you wanted to go back and visit that grave, and you knew that, you would remember where that gravestone is at. You could probably go to the cemetery right now and walk directly to it. They would not have forgotten where the tomb was. They knew exactly where it was at. And also, there were guards outside that specific tomb. And as I continue to state, if the guards would not have guarded that tomb, if they would not have done their job, then they would have been punished. The guards knew what tomb that was. And lastly, even if they did go to the wrong tomb, even if they did steal the body, if someone did steal the body, the Jews, the Romans, his apostles, that still does not account for their witness testimony saying they saw the risen Jesus. And that cannot be explained by an empty tomb. Now, there are many other objections that we can look at, but I'd like to go to our last point, the evidences of the resurrection. Now, the first one I would like to discuss is Josephus. Now, there's a quote from Josephus that several people may use, but being honest, it is not likely that he wrote all of it. It seems that Christians went in and had forged it to make it look like Josephus wrote it, but he did not write it. It is Antiquities of the Jews, 1863. About this time lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was the achiever of extraordinary deeds and was a teacher of those who accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah. When he was indicted by the principal men among us, and Pilate condemned him to be crucified, those who had come to love him originally did not cease to do so. For he appeared to them on the third day, restored to life, as the prophets of the deity had foretold these and countless other marvelous things about him. And the tribe of Christians, so named after him, has not disappeared to this day. Josephus sounds fairly convinced that Jesus is the Christ, that he is the Messiah. And that is why it is strange, because Josephus was a Jewish historian writer. Now, there's no account of him converting to be a Christian, so it does not make sense for him to write this and still continue to be a Jew. Another reading of this, announced in 1972, seems to make more sense for it to be by Josephus. At this time there was a wise man called Jesus, and his conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous. Many people among the Jews and the other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die. But those who had come to had became his disciples did not abandon their discipleship. They reported that he appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and that he was alive. Accordingly, he was perhaps the Messiah, concerning whom the prophets had reported wonders. And the tribe of Christians, so named after him, has not disappeared to this day. Now, if either of these would have been written by Josephus, it seems more likely that it would be the second one. But that still shows that there was a report going around that Jesus was resurrected. The next thing I would like to discuss is the Fox's Book of Martyrs. Now, I do not plan on going into graphic detail about this book, but if you are looking for a book to see the martyrdom of Christianity in the first century, this is the book to go to. And the point that is to be made regarding this book is a point that I referenced earlier, that it does not make sense at all for anybody to die for a known lie. Why would all the apostles, and several other disciples of Jesus continue to die for a known lie. There are people today that die for things, but oftentimes they are deceived. But they were dying for something that they knew was a lie? No, that does not make logical sense. When reading through the Bible and through history, one can see that Christians were put to death for testifying and witnessing, or testifying of being witnesses of the risen Jesus. I want to look at a few evidences that we can look at in the Bible. One of those being the life of Paul and of James. Now, neither of them believed in Jesus and the resurrection because of the empty tomb, but because of his appearance after. This can be said of many of his disciples, but especially with these two. We think of Paul. Paul was a Jew that was determined to imprison and to kill Christians. In Acts 7:58, looking through Acts 9, in 1 Corinthians 15:9, he said that he was not meet to be called an apostle because he persecuted the church. He was one of the worst persecutors of the church in that day, as seen and recorded in the Bible. Why would a man with that much power and success as a Jew, who was skeptic of the resurrection based off of the empty tomb and based off the testimonies of the apostle, become the very thing that he was persecuting? It does not make sense for someone to change that quickly for nothing. Also, James. He did not believe in Jesus, his brother, as the Christ. We see that in John 7:5. As we'll soon see, Jesus appeared to him after he was raised from the dead. James then considered himself to be a servant of Jesus, James 1, verse 1. I'd like to move on to 1 Corinthians 15. We see witnesses listed here. In 1 Corinthians 15, and one thing to remember about the Bible is that while it is one book, it is put together in one book. It is several different books written by several different men in several different places. 1 Corinthians was one of the earliest books written in the New Testament. We see in 1 Corinthians 15, beginning in verse 4, and that he, talking about Jesus, was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he was seen of Cephas, then of the 12, and that he was seen of above 500 brethren at once, of whom the greater part remain unto this present, but some are fallen asleep. And after that he was seen of James, then of all the apostles, and last of all he was seen of me also, as of one born out of due time. Now, it is easy for us to say that Jesus was seen of these people now, living today. But for Paul to say it when he did is no small thing. Notice in verse 6 that he said, of whom the greater part is still alive, but some are fallen asleep. If none of this had happened, it would have been easy for Paul to list the names of people that had already died and say, yeah, Jesus was seen of these people. No, when he gave that list of 15 specific people and 500 others, the Corinthians and whoever else read this letter at that time could have read the letter and seen those names and went and done the research for themselves. Paul allowed them to do that. That is one of the reasons why I believe he listed those names and said that in verse 6. Is because they could do the research for themselves, and we don't see those objections to the resurrection in those early days. Besides the Jews that were told to believe that, but as we answered earlier, that does not add up with what is recorded and what is said by the apostles and by the disciples. Now, this is just scratching the surface of the internal, the biblical, and the external, historical evidences that we can discuss, but I hope I have made the point clear that there's too much evidence concerning Jesus and his resurrection to simply push to the side. Now, there are several other things that we can look at concerning this topic, and I encourage everyone to do that on their own. I'm not even close to being done with the studies that I'm doing on this topic. We can know without a doubt that Jesus lived, died, and was resurrected. This is shown by the biblical accounts of this great event. And even though there are some objections, we see that they do not hold up when using logic and when using what evidence we have. So what does this mean? Well, first of all, it changes how the world views and religions should look at Jesus, the prophet that the Muslims and Jews believe in, and the historical figure that many honest atheists and agnostics believe in or know is truly the Messiah. This means that Jesus is who he said he was. This also means that he should be listened to on how to live. But do we realize the power of this event? Those that are Christians, do we realize the magnitude of this truth that Jesus truly did rise from the dead? As stated at the beginning, this is the greatest event to happen in history. Do we believe it? God has given us everything we need to have true biblical faith based on evidence of this event. We should not just be believing things blindly. That is not biblical faith. Biblical faith is not blind faith. We know Hebrews 11:1, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is based on evidence. That is biblical faith. And as I said, God has given us everything we need to have true biblical faith in this.